Greetings, fellow scribes! Welcome back to the archive! This week I conclude my series talking about Earthdawn by talking about the systems and mechanics. Earthdawn has a novel series of mechanics involving numerical steps and the ranking of different things determining the number and type of dice you roll. So, sit back, relax, and enjoy as I talk about the mechanics of Earthdawn. Earthdawn's system is based on what they call the step system. What this basically means is for everything you do, whether it be a skill, and straight up attribute test, a talent test, anything like that, you determine the step for what you're doing. Now, this step is determined by a two-part formula. You determine what your attribute step is. Now, noting that your attribute rating is not your step. The step is determined by the dice used. So, if your attribute is like a 13 or 14 using a D8, you're not going to be using a 13 or 14 for that. Instead, you're going to be using step 5. And then you add your skill to that. The skill or talent step, let's say you have a 13 or 14 attribute. So you're step 5, and you've got a melee weapons talent of 1. So that would mean you were adding that one step to your appropriate attribute. Meaning you'd be on step 6, rolling a d10. And that's pretty much the core of the system. You look at the dice determined by the step you are on, and you roll those. That determines whether you succeed or fail, because the result you roll is what you roll. Now, whenever you roll the maximum number on a die, that means that die gets a bonus die. So, say you're at step 6. You roll a d10, and you roll a 10. Well, then you will roll another d10 and add that result to the previous. If that one was also a 10, well, then you do that again. Thus, you can get some pretty high successes on even a low skill. Ironically, this kind of means that some of the lower numbers, like D4s, can oftentimes get higher numbers than some of the higher dice, just because D4s tend to roll the same number on each roll of the die because of their shape, because of the shape of the caltrops. But that's just a little quirk of the system and a quirk of how dice themselves work. But at the same time, if all of the action dice you roll come up ones, that means you've automatically failed and something bad has happened. Now note that it is possible to have more than one die. You actually will reach a point where you are adding multiple dice. Like at step 9, you roll a d8 and a d6, for example. At step 14, you roll a d20 and a d4. At step 40, if you were ever to get there, you are rolling 2d20, a d10, a d8, and 2d6. The odds of you ever getting to the point where you are rolling at step 40 are ridiculously rare, but it's possible. But combat works slightly differently, but not too much. How combat works is you roll your attack weapon skill. And you roll at that step that's appropriate for it. Note that there are a number of skills that, even if you don't have them, you can default to the attribute. A select number, which include melee weapons, missile weapons. And what you then do, after you make your roll, is you see if you equal or exceed the defense step, or the defense rating of your target. If you beat that defense, if you equal or exceed that defense rating, you've hit. And then you roll your damage dice. Your damage dice are determined by the appropriate attribute step plus the step of the weapon you were using. So a melee weapon might use your strength plus its damage step. A ranged weapon might use your dexterity plus its damage step. And spells have their own setup. Every spell's kind of different. And then, once you determine your step for your damage, you roll your dice. And then your target subtracts their armor from the damage that they take. Pretty much a basic, straightforward system. There are some other complications, but like armor defeating tests and knockdown tests. But those are variations and options. Those are the core mechanics of combat. Of course, we have character generation as well to talk about, which is where things get a little bit interesting for the time period this was released in. Character creation in Earthdawn is a step-by-step system. You start off simply enough. You pick your discipline. Are you an archer? Are you a thief? Are you a nethermancer? Are you a wizard? What is your character's job? Then you pick your race. Now, race comes with a number of things that go with it. It has attribute modifiers. It has unique abilities like the scrying tail snap, or that windlings can fly. And you pick your race based on this sum of parts, which you're going to play. Then you determine your attributes. Your 6 attributes are determined one of 2 ways. You can roll for them, which is optional. And if you roll for them, you roll 4 dice 6, drop the lowest. This gives a number from 3 to 18. But the default method is point buy. Point buy, you have 66 points. Now, 5 is an attribute rating of 5 is 0 points. An attribute of 18 is 23 points. You can actually gain additional points for your attribute pool by taking an attribute at below 5. Like a 4 gives you 1 additional point to spend for attributes. A 1 gives you 3 additional points. you don't necessarily want to use one attribute, but under the right justifications and the right circumstances, you probably could get away with it. Now, some of the fun little things are, if you want to build a balanced character, you can have all 6 attributes at 13. And then you can have either 1 at 15 or 2 at 14. So that's a more balanced build. But also, say you want to build a troll who's really strong or really tough. So a troll gets a +4 to strength. So let's say you take that 18 at strength for 23 points. You'll figure something out for the others. You've got that 18 base strength, but then you add that 4 to it. Now, of course, there's the downside that you have a -1 to perception for being a troll. But you can live with that. But that's how you determine your attributes. It's quick and easy. I mean, even if you're doing it the old-fashioned rolling way, you still apply bonuses and penalties to your attributes. Then, after you have generated your attributes, you determine your characteristics. Your wound threshold, your physical defense, your mental defense, your magical defense. All that. Of course, then you record any abilities that your races give you. Then you assign your talent ranks. Now, as a starting character, you're only applying these to your first circle talents. And you can only spend these points in your discipline's first circle talents. Almost every profession every discipline has 6 or 7 first circle talents. You get 8 points to spread between them. You do not have to put 1 point in every talent, but by putting 1 point in every talent, that means you started off with a basis in everything, and then you're going to have 2 ranks in 1 or 2 other talents. Or maybe you'll put 3 into 1. Like, say, you're a swordsman. You put 1 rank into everything, and then you make your melee weapons 3. Then you assign your skill ranks. Now, what's interesting is that the skill ranks aren't quite like we think of in other games. You get 2 points into knowledge skills. You can either have 1 skill at 2 or 2 skills at 1. You automatically gain an artisan skill at 1. This is because to prove you're not being taken over by a horror, you have to be able to do some sort of creative endeavor. Everyone in Earthdawn has some craft skill, some artistic skill. You then assign 1 rank outright to read and write the Dwarven language. And you speak your racial language, plus you speak Dwarven. Because Dwarven is sort of the lingua franca, the common tongue of this world. And that's character creation. Now, if you're a spellcasting class, you gain extra points equal to your perception rank for your spells, for picking how many spells you can cast. Or know what spells you know. All the spellcasting classes at rank 1 have 2 spell matrices that they can create. The level of the spell matrix is the maximum level the spell can hold. Unlike in other systems, once you can imprint a spell matrix, you can cast that spell over and over and over again. But you can only start off with a maximum of 2 spell matrices, and each spell matrix can only hold 1 spell imprinting. It takes 10 minutes to re-imprint and reattune a spell matrix for another spell. So, generally speaking, the spells you set up are going to be the spells you keep going with for a while, unless you realize, oh, I'm in this environment, I need to take a few moments and rejigger my spell matrix. I'm good now. But that is pretty much the basics of the systems of Earthdawn. Join me next week as I start talking about Call of Cthulhu, because it's October. I need to do something spooky. Until then, I'd like you all to remember to have fun and keep gaming.